Shalom Aleichem, my dear brothers and sisters. In this video, I would like to share with you something that I've read. And the question is, what's the most disgusting trait that a human can have befront of God? Like, what does God hate the most when it comes to human traits? Now, I'm not talking about the worst sin there is. The worst sin there is probably, I believe, is idolatry. Worshiping something other than God. Blessed be He. And the reason I say this is because idolatry has no exception. So, for example, any other sin that we have in the Torah, if there is a prophet that comes, that has been proved as a prophet from God, he can technically, temporarily tell us to violate that sin, temporarily. So, for example, let's say there's a commandment not to observe the Sabbath, right? For example, and if there's a real prophet of God, he can temporarily tell us that you should violate the Sabbath. So, for example, he says next Sabbath you have to violate and go to war, for example, and as Jews we must obey him as long as it has been proven that he's a prophet. But there's one sin that's the exception to that rule, is idolatry, meaning no prophet can ever tell us to even temporarily worship anything other than God. So therefore, it seems to me that idolatry is the worst sin. But in this video, I would like to discuss a character trait, not a sin in itself, because everybody has this to a certain degree, but a certain character trait. Now, what are character traits? So, for example, greediness, right, is a character trait, or anger, somebody who's angry all the time. This is a character trait. These are not like separate sins that are, commandments, but these are just traits that people need to work on and to better themselves throughout their lifetime. So the question is, back to the question, what's the worst character trait, the most disgusting character trait in front of God? And I read this somewhere, don't remember exactly where, in obviously one of the Jewish sources, but the answer to that question is arrogance or pride. When a person is proud of or arrogant about himself and he assigns credit to himself, this is the character trait that God hates the most. And why? Why is that? Why is this much worse than, let's say, somebody who's greedy or something else? And the reason for that is that because this contradicts the whole purpose of creation. And I'll tell you what I mean. Is that when God created the world, he created humanity. And the purpose of humanity was to serve God, right? To glorify God, to sanctify God. And therefore God would give the reward to the humanity. So the purpose of creation was to sanctify God, to honor God. And when a person is arrogant, what he does, he takes away the credit from God and gives it upon himself. And therefore the whole purpose of creation, of sanctifying God, he removes from that. And he takes the sanctification, so to speak, to himself. And that's why this is the worst type of character trait. Instead of praising God and attributing all the good and everything that God gave him, instead of attributing this to God, he attributes it to himself and he becomes arrogant. And usually what's interesting is that the person is arrogant about the stuff that he has absolutely no control over. So, for example, if a person is big and strong, tall and strong, it's not like he himself stretched himself out to be tall or strong, muscular, right? Something that God gave him. He was born a healthy person, and he was able to. If he was born like with some kind of illness, like dystrophy or something, he would be very weak. It's not like he himself is the one who should be praised for this. And therefore, another example: let's say a person received education. Depends where he lives. He lived in the country where there's like financial aid, or his parents were able to pay for his college. It's not something he can attribute to himself. He got education. If he was born in another country where there's people are forced to work when they're 14 years old in order to support their family, he would not get education because he would be in different circumstances. So that's why a person should never be arrogant, because the stuff that he sort of achieved, it's not really his achievements, it's something that God gave him, and he should praise God for it. So therefore, the worst character trait which all of us should try to avoid is arrogance. A person should be humble of spirit. In fact, the Talmud says that a person should not walk 4 amot. Amot means like 4 elbow length, like maybe 4 steps or so. Should not walk 4 amot with his head raised. He should always walk with his head lowered a little bit, meaning he should be humble. And so this is the message that I wanted to convey today. Thank you for watching.